Wow. Exciting. It is the Deep Dish Deep Dive.
That's right. Chicago style.
Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, let's just get going. You've got cool stuff to show us. You've got the so everyone who watches the show knows Dan Roth. He's been ASP.NET, all kinds of PMs and Blazor lately. So what actually all do you own of ASP.NET these days?
So I work on all things web apps. So anything that like draws UI on the screen, those are technologies that I deal with. So MVC, Razor Pages, Blazor, the Razor tooling in general. Those are the set of technologies that I deal with these days.
Wow. All right. So you're busy. You've got some cool demos to show us. I will jump into our community links real quick.
All right.
Just get this going. Excellent. Okay, so starting here, we've got, let me see, this is sharing okay?
It looks good to me.
Good. Okay. So blog post from Scott Hunter last week, kind of clarifying what's in, what we're supporting. And the cool thing here is if you are using workflow or WCF, these are kind of some future options that you can use for supporting, for migrating to .NET Core. So we were happy to, I worked partly on this.
Yeah, I love this.
So we got, this is a port of WCF to .NET Core, and this is early stages, and it's a community project, but with some Microsoft engineering support.
I'm really excited about this. I'm really happy that this announcement's gone out. It also went out at Build, and the reason I'm really excited is I think with the .NET ecosystem, because Microsoft tends to be such a big player in that ecosystem, I often feel that when there's sort of a indecision by Microsoft, it kind of handcuffs the community to like go and do something cool. Like the code for WCF and WF has been out there, as reference source for a long time, and I've always sort of wondered, well, maybe someone will just grab the code and go ahead and get something working on core. Maybe it's not going to be exactly WCF, but at least a lot of the WCF features based on that code set. But if there's always this ambiguity, like, well, but maybe Microsoft will do it, and so we won't have to, and I'll just be wasting my time if I do all that work in the open source community. What I love about this statement is it makes a very clear statement, like, no, go ahead, like community, we want you to go and own this and love this. If you are a WCF fan, I may have a little WCF, blood in me, history. I worked on it back in the day. Then go for it.
Right.
Like, go party on the code base, make it great. So community,
and this is
give
cool.
It to
we're seeing pull requests. We're seeing issues come in. This is this is an active community project. So yeah, very cool. All right, moving on. This is interesting. This is, and this project's been around for a bit. This is the ASP.NET Contrib OAuth providers. And what I saw recently on a tweet this past week was that they are now publishing these to NuGet. So in the past, you actually had to go out and build them. Now they're available on NuGet. These are OAuth providers that work as ASP.NET Core middleware and integrate with things like GitHub, Foursquare, Dropbox, etc.
Oh, nice.
So
look at those fancy build history graphs that they have.
I know. Now
cool.
I need that. That looks really nice. Except mine would show broken builds.
So you red.
Yeah. All right. So Shahed cranking through. He's doing his A through Z, and he's up to W. So almost done. This is the worker service. So here he's just kind of explaining, showing how worker services work. We've had some shows on these recently. It's nice to see his walkthrough here. Some things he talks about here is actually like the kind of differences in the hosting model. He talks about building and publishing. Logging is important, of course. To be able to actually trace what's going on in your worker. And then he shows running your worker service and actually registering it. So good stuff. Andrew Locke. So we recently had a show on Microsoft feature management, and here Andrew's digging into this. So adding feature flags to an ASP.NET Core app, and he's starting a multi-part series. So I always love the in-depth kind of the way that Andrew goes through all these, and so I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the series. It's nice to see as he's just kind of digging through this, and here using a feature flag to show a different welcome banner, depending on the presence of this feature flag.
This is where you want to flight different features in your web app. Is that right? Like you can just toggle features on and off in your app with a whole framework.
Exactly. And this is something that I've built myself many times over the years. I used to work, before I was at Microsoft even, I worked on conference websites. And so we would have things where like the day that the conference started, it would toggle over into, okay, we're live, and here's the live video player, and here's the, the live tweet stream. But before, and it would show like what are the next sessions and that kind of thing. Before the conference, it was more of a marketing site, like buy your passes and stuff. And we would use feature flags, so we could test those toggles out. We actually there were secret query strings you could put in, and you could QA it and test it in production.
Don't tell anyone about the secret query strings.
Right. Yeah.
That's where the magic features are.
Yep. So anyhow, it's great to have this baked in as a complete feature. So. Cool. CQRS. So this is interesting, putting together OData, and OData actually just joined the .NET Foundation as well too, so a lot of plugs for that. And so here he's hooking together Mediator and OData and showing the CQRS pattern. So CQRS is command query responsibility segregation, and so this is actually I don't know if I've seen this pattern before, although here he's linking to Jimmy Bogard. There have been people using Mediator with CQRS. I haven't worked on this with OData before.
Mediator.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know.
So so this is cool. Just a walkthrough showing how to do that.
Yeah, we actually we have the OData, the docs for doing OData with ASP.NET Core are all in the normal ASP.NET Core doc set. So if you want to learn about OData and .NET Core, you can get started with it today.
Very cool. All right, so this is Peter showing integrating Blazor into existing ASP.NET Core applications.
Oh, cool. And very good.
I thought this is interesting because a lot of the Blazor documentation and tutorials and everything is file new project, and everything's kind of all set up for you. So I liked here how he's showing, actually integrating into an existing one.
Yeah, you can have like an MVC app or a Razor Pages based app, normal server-side rendering pattern. But then if you want to add like a little island of interactivity in your application, you can just drop a component into a page or a view and have it render there, and then we'll wire it up for interactivity in the once the app has been loaded. So you don't have to go. It's like a lot of people ask me, is Blazor like, oh no, do I have to like now do everything with Blazor going forward, or do I have to abandon all my MVC code and then was there Razor Pages code? And the answer is no. Like even none of those models actually subsume the other. Like we have people that do both MVC and Razor Pages development. You can use both in the same app, and the same thing with Blazor. Like Blazor's really actually primarily focused on the client side UI. Like it's all about client side interactivity, and you add that into existing apps today with JavaScript using like Angular or React or any other JavaScript framework of your choice. Blazor's no different. Like if you want to add some client-side interactivity into your broader application, you can do that with Blazor. You don't have to. No need to throw out your own code. They complement each other.
Yeah, and exactly. And I love that, their web technologies, they all work together. I do feel like sometimes when we show, hey, here's the new thing we just built. And of course, that makes sense. We just built it and we're explaining it to you. But showing that, hey, you can just sprinkle it into an existing app is really helpful.
Yeah, the way I think about it is there's two ends to the wire, right? Like there's the server-side end, which we've had a great story for forever with ASP.NET. And there's the client-side end, which for a long time was just, write JavaScript if you want to deal on the browser side of the wire. Now you have an option of addressing the browser side of the wire using .NET code. And those two sides of the wire are both, of course, very important.
Awesome. All right. So this is interesting. This is Beam, and this is a Blazor single-page application. So Entity Framework, ASP.NET Core, and MongoDB.
That's great. I love it.
Yes. So this is neat. This is actually, I hadn't seen this before. This is .NET Academy, I believe he calls it, and he's so this is Rama, and he's just showing some cool. This is one of many, actually. He's got his channel, I think, is going to autoplay some music, so I'm going to have to mute that. But here he builds out all kinds of cool stuff, including like a WordPress, type application using ASP.NET Core. Just a lot of kind of neat stuff. But this Beam one I thought was kind of neat. So here he shows, he's actually developing on a Mac. He's going out and creating a MongoDB backend and using the MongoDB driver NuGet package and just building an application. So neat stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, cool.
Speaking of building crazy stuff on the fly, we've actually started. So we've had for a long time this live.asp.net site, which is what people are like able to watch right now, and this is where we've been having these. The thing is, we also have Thursday shows, and we also are publishing on Twitch, and so this site is not kind of expanding to keep up with that. Also, we'd like it to exist inside the actual .NET community site, so like right inside, you're clicking in here and you're able to see upcoming community stand-ups. So anyhow, this is something where James Montemagno and I have been building this new site kind of on the fly. And our idea is I'm teaching him ASP.NET, he's teaching me Xamarin and mobile, because we're actually going to have also a mobile app that's going to show you, upcoming shows, and you can watch on your phone and you'll get notifications of shows and stuff. So anyhow, we're going to be live with this afternoon. Here's the link to it over on Twitch. And this is actually a little bit, I'm feeling like a fish out of water here, because I'm used to giving polished presentations where you get all your code together and everything's, ready. And here we're kind of coding on the fly and seeing where it goes. So
this is John in the raw. This is just
come watch
pure
me
and
fail.
simple.
Yep. But it's fun. It's neat. So anyhow, there's that. If you want to spend your whole day on Twitch, come join us. All right, this is one you told me about. This is Jeff Holland, and this was a theater session at Build.
It's a short session. It's a quick watch. It's only about, I think, 20 minutes long, but it's packed with stuff. It's all about doing client-side Blazor in Azure Static Site Hosting, and then with Azure Functions for the backend, so serverless on the backend, and then he puts the Azure CDN in front of the web application for better performance, and he does the whole thing from Visual Studio Code. It's super sweet, and he does a great job explaining how the system works. I thought I think this is now for me one of the canonical deployment architectures for a client-side Blazor app. It just looked great.
Wow, very cool. All right. And all of these are in this community links. I'll be sending this out. This is the site. Speaking of serverless and Azure Functions and all that, this is a site that Cecil Phillip and Burke Holland built, and it's it is a Vue application hosted in blob storage and stuff. So pretty neat. So I'll share these out. Interesting kind of side thing. I can't there's an interesting thing with it. Actually uses 404s and redirection and stuff that works as a web app. But if I paste this into YouTube chat, it sees it as a 404. So we're figuring that out. But that was an interesting.
Okay, yeah.
Neat. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing because it's time for you to share.
Oh, my turn?
Your turn.
So shall we make some pizza?
Let us do the pizza time.
All right. So, we just had Build not that long ago, and I did a session. I got to do a session at Build that was a lot of fun. I got to talk about all of the new ASP.NET Core features that are coming in .NET Core 3.0. And so this is the session, and the videos there. The slide deck is up there. And one of the things I showed, for me, the big theme for ASP.NET Core in .NET Core 3.0 is full stack web development. Like we are trying to address more of the entire spectrum of things that you need to do when you're writing a web application. And so for that talk, what we did is we built this Blazing Pizza app, which is actually an existing app. If you want to build the UI for this application. It's a workshop for Blazor that's public on the internet. You can go to aka.ms. Actually, I'll just do it. So aka.ms/Blazor workshop. That's the magic URL that you're going to want to get there, and that'll bring you to the GitHub repo that has all the code for the Blazing Pizza app, at least for the front end. So that was an app that we had, and what we did for this talk was let's build the back end as well, so that we have a full stack web application. So just to to motivate this a little bit. So here's the app that we wanted to build. Like I was saying, like for a long time, ASP.NET has had a really great story for the server. Like if you wanted to build web applications and you wanted to use a request reply server rendered pattern, we've had a variety of options for you over the years that just, of course, keep getting better. Whether it's web forms, MVC, Razor pages, we've had a whole bunch of great technologies that you can use to do server-side rendering of your web application. But if you wanted to do something that actually ran in the browser, well, what do you use? Like, what's the story there? We want to have some code that runs in the browser for Blazing Pizza because we want to have that rich client-side interactivity. We don't want to have to do postbacks for every single interaction. Also for the back end, we're going to be having pizza orders, and that's our business. We want to make sure we keep track of all those orders and that they all get handled. So we're going to put those orders into a queue, and then we should have some background workers that actually handle popping the orders off to the queue, making the pizzas, getting them delivered, and doing all that stuff. And then we're probably going to want to send some notifications back to the user. That lets them know, what's the status of their pizza order, where is the pizza delivery guy, how soon is he gonna or she gonna arrive at my house. So this is all the things that we want to build, and we'd like to use our .NET skills for building all these parts of the app. But historically there have been some question marks, at least with .NET Core, for what to use for these other parts. Like, we've got a great story for the server, but what about the browser? What about the backend workers? What about the server-to-server communication patterns? What could we use there? And so in .NET Core 3.0, we have been trying to address this. And one of the things we talked about at Build is that we are shipping a full stack web development story with C# and .NET. And so, we have the existing technologies on the server, of course. Those aren't going away. Like, these are things that you will still continue to use when you want to do request reply style server rendering, or if you're building web APIs or real time, we've got SignalR, great security and identity story. But now for the client, like in the browser, we have a .NET story for you, and that's Blazor. Blazor is a client-side UI framework for doing web development that can run directly in the browser, either right in the browser on WebAssembly, or we also support a server-side pattern that handles all the UI interactions over a SignalR connection, which I can talk a little bit more about in a bit. In addition to Blazor and components, though, if you still want to do JavaScript, like, you can still do JavaScript. Like, we have our SPA templates that use Angular and React plus Redux. So that stuff's not going away. You can, of course, also write JavaScript if that's what you want to do. And in 3.0, we've done a bunch of stuff to make that experience better as well. Like, we've added support for authentication to the SPA templates. For the back end, we have added a worker service template that allows you to spawn up processes that take advantage of all the infrastructure that we've been using for ASP.NET Core apps for a while, but now makes that infrastructure available to just long-running worker processes. Like, for example, configuration and logging and dependency injection. Having a hosting model for these types of workers is something that we've added in 3.0. And then for your server-to-server communication needs, we have been working with the community on supporting gRPC. This is actually an existing community project that we are contributing to make it work really well with .NET Core. So now we've got answers to all these pieces. Like, we can write our front end web UI logic using Blazor. For our backend workers, we have the new worker hosting model and templates with the generic hosts and all those infrastructure for config and logging and DI. And then for our server-to-server communication, we can use gRPC. So that was the idea behind this application. And we can look at the various pieces. I'm just going to hop out of slides now. Now, by the way, if you want to, several people have asked me, like, can I get hold of the slides? I think the link to the slides was missing for a while. It is now uploaded. So if you want the whole deck, it is available online if you want to present it or use it. So just to give you a feel for what this app does, this is the Blazing Pizza app, and it is, yes, British pizza. This was in honor of Steve Sanderson, the founding father of Blazor, who wrote the first prototype. So you can pick your pizza that you want. Let's order the Brit, and then you can pick the size of the pizza. There's a bunch of toppings that you can choose from, like some sturgeon caviar. So that sounds delicious.
I laugh every time.
I only just actually read through all of these last night. I had sort of just scanned through them before. You can get it served on a silver platter. That's just for a small fee. For a small fee, you can get some fresh baked scones on top. That sounds like a great pizza. You have to take out a loan in order to order this pizza. Right. So we order the pizza.
Is there a payment plan?
And you can see that this is all nicely done with a spa style UI. I'm not having to do any postbacks. This is all happening client side. If we order the pizza, this app is wired up to authenticate the user. It uses Microsoft account for authentication. And so we can hopefully log in with my Microsoft account and we're good. Okay, now as soon as that happens, so we pop over to the order tab, and you can see here's this top one. It says that my pizza is preparing. So the pizza has kicked off. Now in the background, we have our worker processes. Let me pop them up. So this one on the left is our pizza worker. Worker processing, and it just finished the pizza order. So I don't know if you saw that, order 28 now sent for delivery. And this one on the right is the pizza delivery guy who's now spewing back, his location, where is he? And if we go to track order, we can see that those locations are being used to update this real-time map. And you can see it's out for delivery, and the guy's just plowing through buildings in Seattle.
What is this, Godzilla?
Just tunneling through. Yeah. To explain that, this is of course drone delivery. That's how you're able to do that.
Right.
And you get your pizza delivered to you, and any minute now I'm sure someone's going to pop into the room with a pizza. Okay, so that's what the app does. That's all the different pieces actually running. So here's the code. Now the code is public if people want to play around with it. Let me give you guys the URL for that. So that I just have it sitting on my GitHub account. So Dan Roth 27 Blazing Pizza. That's the magic URL that you're going to want for if you want to grab the code for this application. It is a Preview 5 based application. To get it set up and running, there are a few steps you'll have to do. The migrations actually live in a shared class library. A couple things that people run into when they try to run this is here in this .shared class library that's in the project. That's where all the model types are for pizzas and the pizza specials and so forth. And you can see the pizza store context. For interacting with the database. This lives in this shared project as well, as along with the migrations. So when you run database migrations, just make sure you run it from the .shared project, but also point to the actual Blazing Pizza project as the startup project for the app. That'll let you run the migrations to actually update the database with the appropriate schema. You'll also have to configure your own Microsoft account app and put in the appropriate config settings to get the authentication stuff to work. And then when you run,
is that stuff covered in the workshop?
No. So the workshop, the workshop is actually only the front end UI part of this app. It doesn't cover any of the back end. The authentication piece might be covered in there, maybe the migrations as well, because it does use a database. So maybe those two pieces actually are. But all the worker services that are in this app and the gRPC code, none of that is in the Blazing Pizza workshop. Maybe at some point we'll update that workshop to be a full stack workshop, but for now it's focused purely on the UI. So if you want those bits, that was just done for the build demos, and you can get it from my repo. So those are things that just some gotchas that I've had people hit when they tried to clone and just run. Also, make sure you run the Blazing Pizza app just on Kestrel. It doesn't currently work with IS Express for reasons that we won't go into. Just the way you do that is when you go to startup, make sure that you set that you want it to run as a project, not using IS Express, and then you should be able to get up and going. So let's take a look at the structure of the project. So one of the things we wanted to do here is in the talk, we didn't really get to go deep into how this app actually works and how the code is written. So we're going to take a little bit closer look and see all the good and the bad and the ugly of Dan's code as he hacks together his build demos, which is fine. This was primarily about showing the features, like showing gRPC, showing workers, showing Blazor for the front end. I wouldn't necessarily use this app as a reference architecture for anything. You know, don't go deploying this into production expecting it to handle, you know, tens of thousands of pizza orders just yet. We are doing a bunch of work actually right now in preview 7 for the next milestone for .NET Core 3.0 to really start working on our fundamentals and our scale out story. Okay, but let's see. So
but I do like this, that you're hooking several things together, and that's part of why I was excited to have you on to show this, because we've showed several different features separately. You know what I mean? But it's great to actually like start to hook them together and find out which parts are more difficult or harder to scale or whatever it is.
To compose all the pieces into an actual app and see how they actually behave and when used together. Absolutely. Okay, so the Blazing Pizza project, this first project, this is actually a server-side Blazor app. I took the code from the workshop, which I believe is still client-side based. It's based on the WebAssembly version of Blazor, and I converted that to be server-side based. Now that was actually fairly straightforward because the component model is the same. Like you're just basically changing how the components are hosted. Now, it probably is worth taking a moment just to remind everyone about server-side versus client-side Blazor, because that can be a little confusing, just to show the diagram. So client-side Blazor, the way that works is you write your UI components, and they are compiled into .NET classes, and .NET classes and then .NET assemblies, and they are downloaded into the browser along with a WebAssembly-based .NET runtime. So we fire up the runtime. It's just a chunk of WebAssembly code. It runs on open standards. It runs in any modern browser, on desktop, on phones, any platform. We fire up that runtime in the browser, and then we execute your .NET code, including your component logic. And those components interact directly with the DOM, all in process. So that's how that's all happening. That's the client-side model. The server-side Blazor model is a little different. In the server-side model, the components are actually still on the server. They execute on .NET Core, you know, within an ASP.NET Core application. What gets downloaded to the browser is a little bit of JavaScript that then sets up a SignalR connection back to the server. And over that SignalR connection, it sends all of the UI events from the browser to the server. Those UI events then get dispatched to the components. The components render just like they would have in process in the browser, but in this case, they're actually running server-side. The components render, it calculates what needs to actually be updated in the DOM, like what's the DOM diff. It serializes that diff back down to the browser over the real-time connection, and then that gets applied to the actual live DOM in the browser. So you get to code your components the same way. You still get that rich client-side interactivity, like you saw. Like I was using the application. Like this behaves exactly like the client-side version of the Blazing Pizza app, but all the UI logic is actually running server-side. Now, why would you do this? What were the pros and cons of this approach? So nice things about server-side Blazor. Well, number one is it has no WebAssembly dependency. And we're working hard on it, but we haven't finished the WebAssembly.NET runtime. And it won't be done in time for .NET Core 3.0. And we wanted to get as much Blazor to you as we could as fast as possible. So with the server-side model, that enabled us to build out the component model for Blazor, you know, build out the diffing algorithm, all the application model concerns, without needing the WebAssembly-based runtime to be done. Once the WebAssembly runtime is done, we will ship client-side Blazor and you'll be able to use it. We announced step build that client-side Blazor for WebAssembly is no longer experimental. It is in an official preview. It's on a track to ship. And in fact, we update it in parallel with each release of server-side Blazor. But it won't ship with .NET Core 3.0. Client-side Blazor for WebAssembly will ship later. But the server-side model is going to be ready for 3.0, and so that's what we're working on now. So it makes it easier for us to give you some bits that you can actually deploy into production faster. Other things that are nice, well, you don't have to download the runtime, so the app actually starts up a lot faster. You're not downloading, a meg of .NET runtime and DLLs into the browser. You're just downloading that little piece of JavaScript to set up the real-time connection, so that your load time is much quicker. Also, your architecture for your app can be a lot simpler. I mean, your code is running on the server, so if you want to talk to the database or do server things or leverage any functionality of .NET Core, well, you're right there. You can just write code in your components that does that. So that can really simplify things. If you're doing a client-side Blazor app, well, then you're going to need to set up APIs on your server that you send HTTP requests to do anything like access data from your database or talk to your in-memory cache or whatever other functionality is specific to your server. So that can simplify your architecture. Things that are downsides for the server-side Blazor model. Well, it is a connected model. Like, this is not going to work offline. In order for the UI to even function, you have to have a live connection to the server. With client-side Blazor, you could actually implement your app as a progressive web app and support offline with a service worker and not have any UI network connection at all, other than to get the initial set of assets. So server-side requires the network connection. There's also, of course, latency concerns. All the UI interactions are happening over that network connection. So you want to make sure that your app is close to your users, that you've got a good network connection. If you have a high latency connection, the server-side Blazor UI will actually bog down. So you need to make sure you've got a good environment for running these styles of apps. And then also, in terms of scale-out concerns, you're paying with your own server resources to actually run the UI for each connected client. You've got to have a server that can handle a connection for each of these clients. So there's more cost to you for running a server-side Blazor app. Now, we do help you with these things. Like, we have the Azure SignalR service that can help you with connection scale out. You can use, Redis to help you manage state for all your Blazor connected clients, all those types of things. But that is stuff that you have to now handle on the server. Where if it was on the client, you can just push all those concerns off to the user's browser and their machine and their process and not have to worry about it on your server. That's why, like, Jeff Holland's demo of showing client-side Blazor on just Azure static site hosting with just a little bit of serverless in the backend with Azure Functions is pretty compelling. Like, that's a more economical and a more efficient solution than owning everything on the server. But a lot of people like the server-side model because it allows them to keep control. Like, if you don't want your code to leak down to the client, the server-side model lets you do that. Like, no DLLs leave the boundary of your server in the server-side model. So it has those trade-offs, and we think there'll be different cases when you'll use one or the other. So that's that. Just to explain what that's all about.
And this is great because we did have some questions from Mo in the YouTube chat, and he was asking like how to scale out work and what's the security with DLLs being downloaded and all that. I think you answered all that there.
So the one question, scale out for server-side Blazor, like we have a work to do on our side to actually produce good documentation about how you need to set up your servers for appropriate scale out. That is what we're working on actually right now for Preview 7. Security for client side is a question I get a lot. Like, when people see DLLs coming down into the browser, they kind of freak out. They're like, am I being hacked? Right. Like, is this like now able to run code directly on my OS and like touch the registry and do all sorts of crazy things? And the answer is no. Because remember, the way those DLLs run is they are executed by the WebAssembly runtime. Like, it's all in the context of WebAssembly. WebAssembly-based code can't do anything more than what you could do in JavaScript today. It runs in the same browser security sandbox. So from that code, you can't just open up a file on the file system because the browser won't let you do that. You can't go touch the registry on Windows because the browser won't let you do that. You can't open arbitrary network connections to wherever you want because the browser has constraints on where you can open network connections to. So in client-side Blazor, you are still running in that same security sandbox. It has the same security guarantees as if you had written all that code in JavaScript, but instead you got to write it in .NET and C#. So that's the security difference.
One other question, I'm trying to like balance between too many questions and ignoring them, and people go crazy.
We don't want anyone to go crazy.
So Wellev's asking, is it possible to have a server-side pre-render?
Yes, in fact, this app is doing that already. Let me go back to the application. I think I just refresh it. So just refresh, and then we'll view source. I think we're still running. Yes, okay, so there's the app just loaded, and then view page source. Now notice that all the content of the application is already here. Like, it's not just rendering a stub and then updating the DOM later. Like, the first render of this app is actually a full render. And the way that's set up is if we go into this pages folder, one of the difference between the server-side Blazor template and the client-side Blazor template is that the initial render of the app in the server-side Blazor template is handled using a Razor page. Like, this is actually a great example of using both Razor pages and Blazor together. Like, the initial render, that's a request with a reply with some rendered code that's handled by a Razor page. Here's how that, just normal markup and tag helpers for setting up the head content. And then to render the app component, the main component for the server-side Blazor app, that's what this HTML helper is doing. So HTML.renderComponentAsync is saying, please now also render this Razor component right here in this Razor page and wire it up for interactivity for me. So that's how the pre-rendering occurs. So this entire code, including the initial render of that app component, which is the root of my app, all happens initially on the server. Spews out all the HTML, and then on the client in the browser, it then sets up the SignalR connection and rewires back up to the state that was already established for that component. So there is already pre-rendering happening in this app, and that just is set up for you by default whenever you create a server-side Blazor application. Now,
okay, one more question.
Yeah.
Oh, if I can jump in. Eugene's asking, because you showed the server side and the client side, is there, and I know people have set up things where they toggle between them using like a, query string, and they like write the code themselves. Is there ever, are there any plans to officially support like a dual mode where you support both of those together?
So in I think it was even in Preview 4 and Preview 5, we kind of broke dual mode. Like we made it very difficult to flip flop back and forth, and that was it's just where we were, a point in time thing. In Preview 6, which is shipping this week, like very soon, we did some work actually to specifically make it easy again to flip back and forth. We don't have like the dual mode feature built in, where like you literally have a query string where the user can go and like toggle back and forth between client side and server side, but the layering of the app is now set up in such a way that you can do that if you want to. So it's a much simpler setup than it was in, I think it was almost impossible to do in Preview 4 and Preview 5, but now with Preview 6 it will be easy again. We also get questions from people like, can we do it at runtime? Like, can you help me? Like, can I decide at runtime whether or not this component is going to be server side or client side Blazor? That's not something that we plan to ship, certainly for V1. But conceptually, I think there's nothing that technically blocks it. In fact, I've even imagined scenarios where you deploy your Blazor app to a service that has some smarts about the types of clients that are coming to the app, and depending on the type of client, like how good the network connection is or how capable the client is, maybe you switch between server side or client side depending on that particular client. Those types of scenarios should be technically possible. It's not something we expect to have out of the box, but we've heard people ask for it, and we're thinking about it.
Okay.
But one more thing about pre-rendering, though, and this was an oopsie on my part. People have been asking us for a while, like, can I do pre-rendering with client-side Blazor as well? Like in client-side Blazor projects, usually you don't have a Razor page. Usually you just have a static index.html file that has like a marker element that then gets updated with the contents of the client-side Blazor application. But people would like to be able to pre-render the first render of the app server-side, just like we do with server-side Blazor. It turns out that is
performance and also like SEO, right?
Yeah, for SEO, for initial page load times. And it turns out that is totally possible with the existing Preview 5 bits. I had originally thought that it wasn't possible, but it absolutely is. And in fact, I put together a little sample app not that long ago. It's also in my account. So if you go to Dan Roth 27 clients, what is it? Client. Actually, let me just go to my repo so I don't get the name completely wrong. I think it's client-side Blazor. Yeah, client-side Blazor with pre-rendering. Like if we look in here inside the server and we look in pages, it again also has a host.cs HTML file, but this will then pre-render an app that will then run on WebAssembly on the client. So it is possible to do today. It's a slightly different behavior, because once the pre-render is almost just like get pixels on the screen as fast as you can. And then once the runtime gets downloaded, it does its render and it kind of blows away all the DOM, which is very similar, I think, to how pre-rendering with like Angular and React happens today. Server-side pre-rendering is a little bit better in that it will actually maintain the state of the component that was already instantiated and set up on the server. With client-side Blazor, you at least get to see the UI really fast, and then the interactivity comes a little bit later, and the DOM kind of gets updated. So what that means is if you were like hitting the counter button, right, and click, 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 like initially with the pre-render, that won't even do anything because the client-side runtime hasn't been downloaded yet, and then the runtime will come down, and then DOM will get completely refreshed for full interactivity. That's how that one works. But you get a nice fast startup. It's actually shocking. Like I remember I ran the app for the first time and I was like, where's the loading ... Like it's gone. It's just gone because you don't need it anymore because the app pre-rendered. So check that out. That's something that's available today. Okay, let's look a little bit deeper into how Blazing Pizza works. Now I'll give a little bit of overview of just how the UI is set up, and then we'll talk about worker, and then we'll talk about the gRPC code. So we already saw the initial render renders this app component. So the app component is like the root component of the application, and that's in this app.razor file. So let's go ahead and open that up. So app.razor, and this is very common in our templates, essentially just has the router. The router component is the component that knows how to find components in the application that have been set up with a route. How do you set up a component with a route? Well, you use the app page directive, just like so. Like index.razor has an app page directive. That means behind the scenes, the generated class was given a route attribute that has this route captured on the component. And the router is just the component that knows how to go and find those other components and then dispatch requests to those components. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's what the app.razor file is doing, is essentially setting up the router. Now it has this one other thing that's wrapping the router, which is this user state provider. What is that? So that's a custom component that we built for the Blazor workshop that establishes provides services for establishing the current user identity, like dealing with all the authentication concerns. And this was a total custom job that we did for the Blazor workshop because at that time, we didn't have any support for authentication and authorization concerns in Blazor, and so we had to kind of roll our own thing for the workshop. In Preview 6, which is coming out, very soon, we will have a full authentication and authorization story. We've enabled all the auth options for the server-side Blazor template that you can now go and check and say, yes, I'd like individual user accounts. If you want to do Azure AD, you can do that, all those things. And it has a full set of built-in abstractions now for doing similar things to what this user state provider component is doing. This component is actually from this little utility library, this like Blazing Pizza.components library. In here, in this authentication folder, there's the user state provider component and all the code that's associated with it. But what it's doing is just establishing a service that you can use to figure out like who's the current user right now so that you can pivot the UI based on that user. All right, so then that sets up the router and sets up auth. And then the router will then dispatch to one of the pages. And the main page for the app is this index.razor page. This is where all the, where did it go? The pizza cards and the pizza order status stuff is being rendered. We can look at this really fast. So at the top, this main section is rendering pizza special cards for each of the pizzas. That's what's rendering each of these little images and their price. And then it has an on-click handler. Like components can have events. So this is wiring it up to a particular method to show. And if you click on a pizza, what happens is you get that pizza configuration dialog to pop up. And so when you click on the component, we're wiring up a little lambda here, a little delegate to say, well, show the pizza dialog at this point. Now you might wonder
for those kind of UI things, are you using Bootstrap for that, or what's the?
Yeah, all the styling is all done with Bootstrap in this application. Like our templates are set up with Bootstrap, but you don't have to use Bootstrap. Like there's nothing in Blazor that ties you to Bootstrap, but all our templates are set up that way, so it was convenient just to use Bootstrap for all the styling. Yeah.
Okay.
Now you might wonder what this order state thing is. Like this is a service that's being injected into the application. Well, the order state is a pattern for managing app state that we find pretty convenient. Like when you want to coordinate between the pages and dialogues, and you need some place to sort of like handle all those things in a centralized place. It's sometimes really convenient just to define a class that kind of represents the state of the UI. And any events that you want different components to be able to react to, you just put in this class and you make it available through dependency injection. Blazor supports dependency injection. If you go into the startup class for the Blazor app, down here someplace, so here's where the order state service is being set up. This is where all the concerns for like, should I show the dialogue? Like how many orders do I have already set up in my shopping cart effectively? All of that is being coordinated by this centralized order state service. So it's a useful pattern. You don't have to use that pattern if you want to use like, MVVM, or you want to use, one of the various state containers out there, like Flux-like thing or Redux-like thing on .NET, you absolutely can do that. Blazor's very unopinionated about how you manage all your state. All right.
Question that on-click syntax. So you've got the kind of the delegate style thing, where you're pointing off to a function.
Yeah.
Is it possible that would ever, like, I get it. I'm used to seeing it, but it's a little bit weird. You think?
So this is not the only syntax. Like if you just want to put the name of a method right here,
right?
Like that works as well. Like if I had defined a method down in my functions block, like I think that's probably some cases where we do that. Where's an example? Like here's a button. Yeah, so like this on click for this button is just saying at place order, and that will call the place order method, which is down here someplace. Like yeah, this method gets called directly. So that's an alternative syntax. Do you like that better? Is that what you mean?
I guess I kind of do. I don't know.
Yeah, both are possible. Sometimes it's convenient just to throw a lambda in there because it's a one-liner and you don't want to bother like going all the way down to your functions block and adding a method.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
Either pattern is fine, and both patterns are equally flexible. Like if you need to get access to the args for the mouse click event, you can do that with the lambda syntax or with the separate method. If you want it to be sync or async, you can do both. Like those are it's unopinionated. Like do what makes you happy, John. We want you to be happy. Okay, and then we have the sidebar. This is the part on the that right pane of the application. Like if I add an order, like all the order list and the button to click to say I want to actually order something. This is going through each of the pizzas that you've added to the order and rendering them using that little sort of card style UI. And then there's an event to remove it. That's what happens when you click the X. That's what's triggering this on removed event for that configured pizza item. And then would remove it from the list. If you don't have any orders, like this is nice. Like the fact that you get to use full Razor syntax, like you get to just define these conditionals like this and say like, if I don't got any pizzas, in any orders yet, then just render something else. And then at the bottom, this is the button for actually submitting the order for the pizza. It calls place order. Now this little templated dialog is one thing I want to talk about. What is this? So this is the actual pizza configuration dialog. Like when I click on one of these pizzas, this UI is this component right here. And it's got some interesting stuff, some interesting Blazor component model features going on. So first of all, it's a templated component. That's not a built-in component. That's a component that's provided by the workshop, but it's implemented right here, again, in that components library. And all it is it has a Boolean that says whether or not you want to show the dialog. And then I think this is using just standard like Bootstrap classes for defining a dialog. And then it renders whatever you want inside of the dialog's content. So this is a template-based parameter. So you can see that the child content parameter is of type render fragment. This allows you to capture like a chunk of Razor and say, I would like to now render this chunk of Razor right here. This is a pattern for having components that have templates that you want to allow the user to specify when that component is rendered. This is really common for things like if you have a grid and you want to specify the template for the headers and the rows and the cells, this is how you can do that. The child content template parameter is basically saying, anything that's a child of the component I want to render in this place. So, and that's what we're doing in the index.razor. Like this, basically everything inside of the templated dialog is what's being captured by child content. But alternatively, if you wanted to have multiple named parameters, you can do that as well. And then you would specify a wrapper element inside the child of the parent component that specifies the name of the parameter that you're specifying a template for. So that's just templating in Blazor. It's a powerful feature when you want to have a way for the user to specify the template for a chunk of the UI that the component's going to render. And then this configure pizza dialog, that's the actual guts of that dialog. That is, I think, in here. Yeah, configure pizza dialog has all the stuff for all the various toppings and being able to add toppings and remove toppings, cancel and confirm the pizza order. So that's sort of a brief overview of how the UI here is built. If you want to build this yourself, go check out the Blazor workshop. It will walk you through all of the UI concerns of the app.
Cool.
So that's sort of kind of what I want to say about the UI. I want to now start to look at the back end a little bit. Like how does the work really happen when you actually purchase an order? Like when we place this order, what then occurs? So if we go back to index.razor, you'll remember that there was this button right here. So this is the button that's at the bottom of that sidebar, the right sidebar, this yellow order button. That's this button right here. There's the order. And what does it do? Well, on click, it's going to call place order. And then in place order, let's see what that method does. Make sure that you're signed in. So using this sort of temporary solution for authentication, that all this code gets replaced with real authentication model in preview 6. And then we have this store service, which I think is iPizza store, which is representing all of our interactions with the database and the queues. That store service then has a method to place the order. So we place the order, and then we reset all the state of the UI back to normal, and then navigate to the My Orders page. And that's this other tab up here that shows, if I was signed in, would actually show all of the orders that I have either in progress or that I've already done, like all my order history. If I signed in so we can see all that, load the orders from the database, and there they are, okay? So what does this place order method do? Let's go look at our pizza store service implementation. So down there's all the code for just like getting orders out of the database. Down here, place order, you can see that it's using Azure queues. So this is a queue-based model. Remember, we're going to take this order and we're going to stick it in a queue because it's super important. We don't want to lose it. We want our workers to be able to pop it off as soon as they can. But if they're busy, we don't want the order to just like disappear. And so we're using Azure queues to put this order request into the queue that the worker can then pop off. And this is just using the standard Azure Queue SDK library to do the implementation. Another tip for people who want to run this app themselves, in order to get the queues locally on your machine, you do need the Azure storage emulator to be installed on your machine. So make sure you've got that up and running. That will allow the app to set up the queues for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, cool.
So that will put the message in the queue, and then we need some workers to actually pop off those messages from the queues and do something with them. So let me show you this. So this is I was in the process of creating a new ASP.NET Core app, ASP.NET Core 3.0 app, and you can see in 3.0 we have this new worker service template. I think we saw a little bit of that in the community links. Worker service, and I think I have a slide on this. Let me pop up a quick slide. Yeah, worker services. So worker services are a long-running process. They can have endpoints, but they don't have to. Like my worker services, they don't have any endpoints. All they're doing is listening on a queue and then putting messages onto a different queue or sending gRPC messages. They don't actually expose any endpoints themselves, but they could if you wanted to do that. And they are convenient because they have all the normal infrastructure that you'd like to have for a long-running process, but without all the overhead of having all of ASP.NET Core in the project. Like you want logging and config and DI and those types of things. They also integrate with different hosting models. Like if you want to host them as a Windows service, we have a package that lets you do that. I demoed that at Build. I'm not going to do that today, but go check out the Build talk if you want to see hosting a worker service in a Windows service. But you can also host them using systemd or as a web job or in a container. It's a very flexible hosting model. And so to create them, all I did for the Blazing Pizza app is I just created a couple of these worker service projects, and those are here in the solution. So if we look down a little bit further, you'll see there's a pizza worker. That's one of them. And then there's the pizza delivery worker project. So those are my two workers that I just created using that project template. Now, if we look at the code, there's a little bit of code in Program CS just to set up the host. You notice that this is not a web host. This is the generic host that the web host infrastructure in ASP.NET Core is based on. But this allows you to host stuff without having to pull all of the web concerns in, like setting up a web server and all that stuff. And then the actual worker class is what then gets started up. So here's the worker for the pizza worker. And the code's pretty simple. Like when the worker is started, it makes sure it has a connection to the queue. That makes sure the queue is set up. And then down below, it just gets a message off of the queue, deserializes it, and then starts. It just it's not actually making pizzas. I know that's probably disappointing to some people that there's no pizzas really being made here. It just sort of does a delay while it's preparing the pizza. But it also does this little bit here where it's sending a message back to the front end server to let it know what the status of the pizza order is. So when the order gets put in, it's been ordered, and then it sends a status of saying, okay, I'm now once it's popped off the message, the worker will let the user know, I'm now preparing your pizza. And then once the pizza is done, about 10 seconds later, it sends another message to the user that's sent out for delivery. Actually, I think it doesn't. Does it actually send this here? It says client sent. No, this here it just puts the message in the queue, and I think it lets the pizza delivery guy send a status to the user that it's out for delivery. So this is just the pizza's
do we show that status update stuff in the front end that actually shows like, hey, your pizza's now? Cool.
Yeah. So like here it gets showed here. Now this initial status isn't updated real time. This status is just pulled directly from the database. But when you go to track, it picks up that status in the tracked stat.
Right.
So here it says delivered and so forth. Like all the real time stuff's being updated here. Cool. Okay, so that's what the pizza worker is doing. The pizza delivery worker looks very similar. I'll just look at the worker class for that guy. So again, making sure that the queues are all set up. And then it waits for messages on the pizza delivery queue. This is the queue that the pizza worker put the message in to say that the pizza's ready to go. I've got a pizza for you. And then this guy does a bunch of messages back to the front-end server to let the front-end server know about its current location. So it's got this whole while loop that every second it's reporting a latitude and longitude coordinate back to the front-end server so it can update the map. So all the map animation is driven by the notifications from this back-end service.
What is that act class?
Which class? Where?
Right above the while loop. It says
here?
ack. Yep.
I think that's just the response that gets sent back from the gRPC. So we haven't talked about gRPC yet, but I believe that's the response from the gRPC service to say like, okay, I got your message.
Got it. Okay.
It's the service that I set up for this demo happened to be a request reply pattern.
Okay.
Yep. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about gRPC. So let me pop down here. So all of the communication from those worker processes back to the front end is handled using gRPC in this application. If you don't know what gRPC is, it's a high performance contract-based protocol for RPC services. It's based on protobufs for the serialization of data on the wire, which is a very efficient binary serialization format. It's a nice protocol to use because it has broad interoperability across a whole bunch of different platforms. They've got gRPC clients for pretty much any platform that you care to develop code for. And we think it's great for back-end service-to-service communication, where you're just trying to pump bytes across the wire as fast as you can. gRPC is a good fit for that. It's based on HTTP2. And it does require HTTPS. So if you want to use gRPC, you're going to need to have HTTP2 set up and also SSL so that you can use the protocol because it is required. Now, how did I set up those services? Let me go back to where I was creating a new project. There is a gRPC template right there. So that's how you can create a new gRPC service. That'll just create your project that has a proto file already set up. Now, what is this proto file thing that I keep referencing? Well, let's go look in Blazing Pizza. So there's a service in here. Here's the pizza order service. This is my gRPC service. It's got this send status method. So all of these status updates from the backend worker processes are ending up here. This is where those messages are being pumped into the front end. And then there's a little service that this guy calls, where is it done? Yeah, it uses this update order status updater service to let all the components know that the status has been updated. So this is kind of a brute force approach. Like there's literally one singleton service that all my components on this one front end machine are listening on to get those updates, okay. And then the components then just filter based on the order and the user that notification was sent for. Obviously, there's some scale concerns here that would have to be addressed if you were to do this for real. Like this works today because I only have one front-end machine, and all my worker processes are talking just to that one front-end machine, and all the clients are connected to that one front-end machine. If you were to then try to scale out that front-end machine, you would need to have some solution for how does the worker know which front-end machine to talk to send the notification to, so that it can actually send that to the right client. And then when you talk to the right machine, how do you correctly manage sending the notification to the correct client that's connected to that machine, because there might be multiple clients on that machine. This app doesn't address all those things, but those are the things we get to do when we're doing demoware. But that's how that works. Now the service is actually defined using this proto file. So this is a format that's defined for gRPC services. It's an intermediary contract format for saying this is what my service is, and this is what it does, and this is the data format for all the endpoints that I'm defining for this service. So it's a pretty simple RPC service. So this is a request reply pattern. It has a send status operation. I don't even know what to call these things. Like actions, are they methods? And I don't know the procedures. I guess they must be procedures, right? Because it's gRPC.
Yeah, RPC.
We'll call it a procedure. Takes a status update and then returns that ACK. And that's what you were asking about before, John. The ACK is like, yeah, I got it, thanks. And it's really just a dummy message that comes back. For the clients that are talking to this gRPC service, there's a order status client class library that I set up that also has the same contract wired up in it. And then it generates a strongly typed client that is then referenced by the two worker processes. So if we go looking like at the dependencies for the pizza delivery worker, there you can see it has a reference to the order status client. Now, where is the order status client class? Like, it's not even showing up here. That's because it is completely code generated from the protofile. Like, I didn't even do any I didn't derive from it. I didn't modify it in any way. I just used the generated client directly from this protofile. The protofile is set up here in that project, and this is what the gRPC tooling picks up to generate the client class. So if you're familiar with like WCF or even back in the day like ASMX, where we would generate client code for you from like a WSDL for your SOAP services, this is very similar pattern, except instead of WSDL, you're using a protobuf file, and instead of SOAP for the protocol on the wire, you're using gRPC. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's gRPC. So that's how the backend then talks to the service. And I think that's pretty much it. Like we saw the models. Did I miss any projects? So we saw the order status client, this components library has all those. This is so the map, how's that done?
Yeah, people are asking about the map.
So where's the map? Okay, so the map is done using a third-party component, like it's like Leaflet or something. Yeah, Leaflet I think is the third-party map component that we use, and that is JavaScript based. Also, this is important because a lot of people, not a lot, but some people come to Blazor expecting that, okay, I've been told I can write C# now instead of JavaScript. This means I do never, ever, ever in my life have to write another line of JavaScript, and I'm so happy about this. And while that is in some sense true, Blazor still has JavaScript interop for cases where you do actually want to call into like a JavaScript. Let's say you have a JavaScript library that you've already built and you don't want to rewrite that code, you just want to reuse it. You can call into your JavaScript library from Blazor. Maybe there is a JavaScript library like Leaflet that you didn't write, but someone else did, and you're like, you know what? I don't want to rewrite all that code in C#. I'm just going to use this. I'm gonna bite the bullet and just reuse this JavaScript library. You can do that as well. Or maybe there are...
Which is great. It's additive, right? You're not having to choose and give up something. This is hey, you can also use C# and you can also use all your .NET skills along with everything else on the web.
You have full power to do everything in the web app that you want to do. If that involves some JavaScript, that's fine. You can do that. If you don't want to write JavaScript, that's okay. You can write the same code using .NET. Now, if you need to interact with browser APIs, let's say you want to call the geolocation API or local storage and those types of things, what do you do then? So for some of the browser APIs, we've already written the JavaScript interop code for you, like as part of Blazor, as part of the mono WASM story, like HTTP client. HTTP client under the covers is calling into the browser fetch API, but you don't even know or care that that's happening. You're just creating an HTTP client and using it, and it just works like a normal .NET HTTP client would. All of the DOM interactions are being handled for you by Blazor. Like, you're not having to go and get grab the DOM element yourself and populate it with content. Blazor does all that for you using the component model and the DOM diffing algorithm to handle DOM updates. Now, there are a bunch of things that we don't provide for you. There's lots of browser APIs like geolocation and local storage, for example, that we don't implement. For many of those APIs, the community went ahead and wrote a JavaScript interop class library that does all the JavaScript interop code for you, basically shrink wraps the JavaScript code in a .NET wrapper. So you can call it as if it was written in C#. You just install their NuGet package and away you go. And the way you can find those, I find a convenient way, is there's a really great project called Awesome Blazor. It's a community managed GitHub repo. Adrian manages this repo, and it's just a huge giant list of links of sample applications and libraries that work with Blazor, and a lot of these libraries are JavaScript interop libraries, like sensors, like Blazor.sensors. There's a couple local storage ones in here someplace. Hotkeys, I think, is one as well. Gamepad, like a lot of these. Geolocation, there's geolocation right here. A lot of these are JavaScript interop libraries that you can just install. You don't have to write a line of JavaScript. You just call into JavaScript as if it were C#. Now, in the very rare case that one of those doesn't exist for the library or API that you want to call, in that case, you may have to write some JavaScript interop code yourself, which was the case here in Blazing Pizza. Like, no one had written a wrapper around leaflet for us, and so we wrote ones because we wanted to have a real-time map. So that's how this is done, and you can see the JavaScript interop code actually right here. We're calling it to JavaScript, passing in a set of markers and the element that we want to update with the content. So that's how the map works. It's done with JavaScript interop.
Wow, very cool.
All right.
So we're at about an hour. We do have a few questions people have asked. I just wanted to, one, Michael asked if, will protobuf tag support extend backwards to earlier MS Build versions?
Will protocol tags extend backwards to earlier?
Protobuf.
Protobuf. So I think I'm not entirely sure exactly what that's meant by. So like I think he's referring to this part of the programming model. I think he's suggesting there maybe have been some evolution of this model that has been changing over time, and questions about whether we'll support older models versus newer models. And I actually I don't know. I'll have to follow up with
those targets and stuff. The protobuf tag that you've got right there on line 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far like this was the model in preview 5. I don't know if this is now. I know there are new features coming to gRPC in preview 6. Like they're adding a kind of like a gRPC client factory, very similar to the HTTP client factory that we have for HTTP clients. A very convenient way to configure your gRPC clients in your ASP.NET Core or worker service templates, so that you can just ask for a gRPC client that's already configured. I know that stuff is happening. I'm not sure how much of the MS Build pattern has been changing. We'll have to follow up on that one offline. Okay. Ask us on GitHub or ping us on Gitter and so forth.
Cool. Another question, can you tell us about server-side Blazor using Azure SignalR service and static blob storage web application?
Yeah.
So client-side hosting and blob storage.
So server-side Blazor is we strongly recommend using the Azure SignalR service with server-side Blazor. And the reason for that is, well, every client that connects to your app is going to need to have an active SignalR connection, which means you're going to need to be able to support client connection scale out. And that's what the Azure SignalR service does for you. It basically, every time a client tries to connect to your app, it gets redirected over to the Azure SignalR service. The service gets you set up the service to support as many connections as you want, 10,000 concurrent connections. And then the service then sets up a multiplexed connection back to your front-end servers. So you don't have to handle 10,000 connections from your front-end servers. So we recommend using the service. The way you set it up is actually really trivial. It will be especially trivial once we ship preview 6. With the latest Visual Studio preview, when you publish your server-side Blazor app, Visual Studio will actually detect that this is an app that's using SignalR under the covers. And then when you go to set up like your Azure App Service, there's a section in the Publish UI. I think I can kind of show it here. This is a slightly earlier version of Visual Studio. I don't know if it has the full set of features, but I think if we can show part of it. So if we go to Publish, down here in this dependencies section, do you see that?
Yep.
Let it fire up. So you can see I've already wired up the Azure SignalR service as a dependency for this app, and you do that by saying add Azure SignalR service as a dependency. In the next update to Visual Studio, they will actually display a UI here when you go to publish a server-side Blazor app that says, hey, we've detected that you're using SignalR. We really recommend using the Azure SignalR service. If you're going to go to app service, go ahead and add. We suggest adding the dependency. We don't add it for you, but we will at least give you that recommendation. You just add the dependency here. You don't have to change a line of code in your app. What it will do is we'll add a single package to your app. I think this app probably has it. Let's go look under NuGet. Microsoft Azure SignalR. It'll add that package to your app, and that package is all you need. You don't need to change your code or do anything else through the magic of the new endpoint routing system in .NET Core and in ASP.NET Core 3.0. All you need is to add that package. It will provision the Azure SignalR service if you ask it to, or you can use an existing one, and it will configure it so that your app will use it once you actually publish to Azure. So it's a pretty seamless experience when you're doing a publish flow to use server-side Blazor with the Azure SignalR service. Now, with client-side Blazor, you don't generally need the Azure SignalR service because your app is just a bunch of static files. Like you can just publish it to any static site hosting solution and you're good to go. You don't even need .NET on the server. So you could publish a client-side Blazor app to GitHub pages, to Azure static site hosting, or any static file hosting solution that you'd like. And that's all you need. If the client app does talk to a .NET backend, and it's using SignalR to talk to that .NET backend, which you can do, then you might consider using the Azure SignalR service in that case. But it's not an intrinsic part of the client-side Blazor model that you need SignalR. It's only intrinsic to the server-side Blazor model.
Okay, very cool. I think we're pretty close to time. You had wanted to say a little bit about the new release, or?
Sure, I can. It's done. Like it's baked. Yay. We're taking it out of the oven. We just need to now serve it to the world. You know, slice off pieces of delicious smelling ASP.NET Core 3.0 apps to the world. The build is actually publicly available if you want to try it out as a nightly build. The way you do that is, the way I do it is I go to ASP.NET Core, the root ASP.NET Core repo. Oop, that's where I go. And we'll go there. And if we look in the README, down here you'll see download our latest daily builds. And so I click that. And then this will then walk you through the instructions that you need to set yourself up with the latest build of .NET Core 3.0. Now, you're going to want to first go and get a build of the .NET Core SDK, the latest build of the .NET Core SDK. You will need all of these package sources because all the packages that are used by this nightly build are on random dev feeds, apparently all over the place now. It used to be like one myget feed, and then I hear we had so many packages on that myget feed that it just kind of like fell over and died, and so we had to switch to a different package hosting solution for our dev feeds. And I think we're actually moving to ASDO pretty soon for our dev feeds as well, Azure DevOps. Yep. Okay, but then to get the .NET Core SDK, click on this. Make sure you configure all those package sources that I showed you there, and then this release column. This is the candidate build for Preview 6, and you can see that in the very small text. 30100 preview 6012264. That is, I can tell you, the candidate build for Preview 6. So go ahead and click the installer, install that on your machine, and you can build Preview 6 apps. Make sure, again, that if you're doing anything with Blazor and .NET Core 3.0, that you are on the Visual Studio Preview channel. You should not try to use 3.0 with VS 2019 stable. Like a lot of people have tried. They have suffered as a result. We don't want you to suffer. Make sure you're using the preview channel. By preview channel, I mean go to visualstudio.com/preview. This is what you're going to want. I believe today, preview 2 of 16.2 just should be out either momentarily or has already gone out. So make sure you get those bits. That's what you're going to want. And then get the .NET Core SDK that I just pointed you at. And that's enough to get up and running with server-side Blazor and worker services and gRPC services with the Preview 6 bits. And we will have documentation all published live for those bits shortly as well as the normal announcement blog posts describing all the new features.
Awesome. I think this is a good spot to wrap up.
Cool. I hope that helped.
We should. Okay, so go back to the thing where we can see you wave goodbye at least.
Okay. This thing. Hello.
There you are. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Like when I pinged you, I was like, I hope we have enough for like, it won't be an hour, but I hope we have enough to, cover at least a half hour. We could have gone like much longer. Like this was awesome.
Lots of good questions from people in the community. Thank you everyone for watching and trying out Blazor. Go to blazor.net, download it, install it, go do the Blazor workshop. There's actually, they're doing a big revision to the Blazor workshop right now to add a whole bunch of new stuff to it. So it's just getting better, and let us know.
I actually I was flying back from a conference in Europe, and on the plane I did the Blazor workshop. Like the release build of it, not the upcoming one. But it was great. It's really, so it's fun to go through, and I like the way you kind of, you start with, you like implement a feature at a time and
evolve the app as
exactly.
patterns. Yeah, that's very deliberate. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, this is great. Thanks, everybody. Join us every Tuesday and Thursday for these community stand-ups. When the show wraps up, there's also a thing in there for show suggestions. We're looking at your show suggestions for upcoming shows. So let us know what you'd like to see.
We'll have to have a show on Preview 6.
Yes.
Preview 6 features. All sorts of great stuff's coming.
Exciting. All right. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks,
everybody.